So when rumors of layoffs started at the factory where I used to work in 2001, I decided to go back to school. First class I ever took was a calculus class, and the second class I took was a public speaking class. I didn't know there was any such thing as Toastmasters back then. I'd never even heard the word Toastmasters. But I knew that getting up in front of a room and talking to a room full of people was not something I particularly had a whole lot of interest in doing, and that stepping outside of my comfort zone and learning to develop myself as a public speaker would definitely be something of benefit to me. The class had one interesting element to it, in that we were required to videotape our speeches, and that at the end of the semester our final assignment would be to watch the videotape of all of our speeches and write a self-evaluation of our own speeches. And I can tell you that I procrastinated that assignment more than I ever procrastinated any term paper. But when I finally did the assignment, it was really valuable. I started to notice a lot of things that I had no awareness of when I finally started to see myself on camera. And fast forward to 2007, when I joined this club for the first time, I videotaped a few of my first speeches here. And I found that the experience of videotaping and reviewing my own speeches after the fact was extraordinarily valuable for three particular reasons. Number one, the camera does not miss a thing. That's not necessarily true about traditional evaluations. See, when I stood behind the podium, I used to hang to the podium for dear life. If you could see it, I hadn't had anybody put it to me exactly this way to see what I was doing, but I had this thing where I was just gripping the podium as if I was just, it was bizarre to watch it on camera. I didn't display those videos publicly, but I had another interesting tendency with the podium is I'd smack the side of the podium, I'd stand here kind of like this, or in between the speeches, whenever I was making a point or an emphasis, I'd sit here and smack the podium. Not one evaluator had ever actually said a word about that, but I saw it on the camera and I said, were people just getting amusement from just watching me do this and just wondering how long it was going to take me to figure that out? When I walked out from behind the podium for the first time, I had a couple of other little gestures and things that I did. I used to do this with my hands a lot, and evaluators had commented on that before, but I never really grasped the full extent of it until I actually watched myself doing it on camera. And I had something else that I did with this hand clasping gesture, where I'd come and I'd do this thing with my hands. And I'm not really sure why I ever did that, but I was just doing it over and over again. And probably one of the best ones that I noticed was smacking my lips in between pieces of a speech. And I'll still catch myself doing it now. I noticed it a lot more ever since I saw myself doing it on camera. And just go like this in between different speeches, right at the end of a sentence. For no apparent reason, I just stand there and do that. And when I saw how often I was doing that on camera, I was like, good God, why didn't somebody tell me this? So I found it really valuable, and I think it's been something that I've been giving a lot of thought to, is how well would our speeches improve if we all videotaped our speeches? Now, another thing to consider is that the second reason is the camera never forgets what happened, and that's valuable for a couple of different reasons. For one, I can review my old speeches that I did a couple of years ago, and I can look back over the records of speeches that I gave, and it's pretty useful as kind of a diary or a journal. One example is my Improv Everywhere speech that I did, and I'm going to talk about that again in a little bit. And there's also my listening speech. I reviewed that over and over again, just to remind myself of what the content was that I spoke about. And it's also useful, I've found, for getting back to some of my old content, for developing a speech further. Because the thing is, my speaker's notes are usually pretty limited. I just have bullet points. Recently I've been writing out the whole speeches, but historically I don't actually read off the whole speech. I mean, I don't like to stand up here and read off a piece of paper. So a videotape is the best method I've found for actually capturing the content of what I said in front of the room. And I can get a sense of what the audience's responses were because there's enough of a little laugh track in the background, even though you can't actually see the audience on the camera. Finally, and actually I confess I have to look at my notes for a second here, but I would have, let's see, and sorry, my third reason for videotaping speeches that's been valuable is that YouTube is a very good exposure vehicle. I put my speeches on YouTube the last couple of times, and the Improv Everywhere speech that I talked about, it's about a theater group in New York that does some interesting things. And I talked about it for a long time, saying that I've had 1,500 views on YouTube. Well, I just looked at it last night. I have had 800 more views. There's now 2,300 plus views. Now, the interesting thing about this was that if I had known I was going to be getting up in front of an audience of 2,300 people, I'm not sure I would have actually ever had the guts to do that, but it only looked like a room full of about 10 to 12 people at the time. Other reason that that's been useful is that I can now email the speech to other members of other clubs and get feedback online for my speeches. I've even had people post comments on the YouTube page about my speech, point out some interesting things there. It can also be sent over the LinkedIn Toastmasters group. I know we've gotten involved, some of us are on that now. And I can send it out, and I'll be doing this today, I send it out over the email distribution to the club so that the people who are not here today to hear the speech in person will have an opportunity to hear the speech. Very valuable for a lot of different things. So, in conclusion, you might find the idea of videotaping your speech to be somewhat intimidating. I know that that's not something people by default are very comfortable with. But a couple things to keep in mind is you don't have to put your speech on YouTube. I didn't put my first couple of speeches on YouTube just because I didn't want to have the quality of what I said out there. And you have the option of just keeping it for private use and private viewing, just to review your own speech, and you may not ever even show it to anybody. And some people don't even want to do that. I'm clear that psychologically there's the temptation to say, well, you know, I'd really rather not see that. But you keep in mind that everybody else already saw it anyway. So you might as well at least be consciously aware of what you're putting out there, because it really is a valuable development tool to just understand the reality picture of what message you're communicating, not only with the words that you speak, but with the body language that you convey up in front of the room. So I would strongly suggest, we have a camera here. I can bring a camera any week. Dan's done that a couple of times. And I think it's a resource that's very underutilized. Most clubs are not using it, and I would really encourage you to step out there and give it a try if you're at all thinking about it.